We have a great viewer question this week from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 11. Let's dive right in and read that first up. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that they may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So if we take that in isolation, we see God sending a delusion for the purpose of a false belief that leads to condemnation. All I can say to that is, yikes. There's so much there, there's so much to look at, but first we should place it in context. What preceded verse 11? So here's 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 9 and 10. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders. Notice the word false. And with all wicked deception, deception's pretty important here, for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. The truth was available, but they refused the truth in favor of false signs and wonders and deception. So people are perishing, we're told, because of rejecting truth in favor of deceptive false signs and wonders. They favor a lie over the truth. That's the immediate context. That's critically important. Let's go back to verses 11 and 12 and reread those with that in mind. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that they may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in righteousness. I think I misread that. In order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So notice, verse 11 begins with a therefore. And I always say, if there's a therefore, you must look and see what it's there for. But in this case, therefore isn't actually in the verse. The word therefore that's normally translated therefore is omicron, upsilon, nu. But here, let's take a look at what is written and not not the way it was translated. So the first part of the verse is kai dia tuto. And kai is and, dia is either on account of or because of, and tuto is this. So, and on account of this, or and because of this, either translation is valid. This is much stronger than just therefore God sends them a strong delusion. No, and because of this, God sends a strong delusion, or and on account of this, God sends a strong delusion. On account of what? On account of the dynamic expressed in the previous two verses. The conscious choice to go after false signs and wonders and delusions while rejecting the truth. That's the this that prompts God to send this strong delusion. So the fact that they reject truth in favor of falsehood is the reason for everything that we read about in verse 11 and 12. Let's go on and look at the next part. Pempe autois hotheos energeon planes. So Pempe, he sends. He, she, or it sends. Third person singular. Present active indicative, third person singular from Pempo. He sends. Who is he? Hotheos is he, our subject in the nominative case. God sends autois, this is a dative plural, to them. Sends what to them? Energeon, which is a working or an action, planes. Which is error or deception. So energeia, working or action, plane, error, deception. But here in our phrase, energeon planes, planes is what's called an attributed genitive. Not attributive, which is how we talk about adjectives and adjectival phrases. This is an attributed genitive where we treat this noun as though it were an adjective. So it's a working, it's an action. What kind? A deceptive one. So it's a delusion, a deceptive working or a deceptive acting, a deceptive operation. It is a delusion. And it's called in the ESV a strong delusion because by using this attributed genitive, we're strengthening the concept here. We want to sort of compound our understanding. This is a misleading, deceiving, deceptive working or operation, a delusion, a thing that is leading you astray. Okay, now that sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it? God sends a delusion, a thing that leads people astray, for a specific reason. Why? What is the reason? We were already told that the recipients of this delusion preferred deception and false signs and wonders to the truth. So what does God send them? God sends them what they've already showed a preference for. This is what they like. They prefer falsehood, false signs and wonders and deception to the truth. So they receive more of it from God. Wow, wild stuff. Let's look at the next part and see why. To what end? Eis to pistiusai autus to pseude. So eis to pistiusai autus is an articular infinitive that's governed by the preposition eis. And it's so we translate it kind of like a subjunctive hina clause. In order that, or so that, autus, they, to pistiusai, should believe or may believe. Believe what? To pseude, in the falsehood. In order that they should believe in the falsehood, or in order that they may believe in the falsehood. This is pretty wild. So it's either expressing a purpose or a result. In order that they should believe in the falsehood, and with the purpose that they should believe, or in order that they believe with the result that they believe. He sends it so that they have, so the result is that they believe. I lean toward purpose, but this is an interpretive choice that each person has to make. There's not a concrete clue to tell us whether it is an infinitive of purpose or of result. I think it's probably purpose. Why did he send it? With the purpose that they should believe in the falsehood. And then we get to the reason for that, the second part. Hina krithosin pantes, hoi me pistiusantes te aletheia. And then we'll look at the second part after that. Hina, in order that, remember I referenced a moment ago, hina clause in the subjunctive. Here we get one. Hina, in order that, krithosin, they should be condemned. This is a passive voice subjunctive. Who should be condemned? Pantes, all. Hoi me pistiusantes, the ones not believing, te aletheia, in the truth. So why does he send the strong delusion? In order that they may believe in the falsehood, in order that the ones, all the ones not believing in the truth, and then we get the last part, which is really great, alla eudokesantes te adikia. Rather, eudokesantes, take pleasure, the ones who take pleasure, te adikia, in unrighteousness. So, why send the delusion? I'm going to put the pieces together momentarily, but stick with me here for a second. Why send the delusion? One, it's their preference. They prefer false signs and wonders and delusions to the truth. Two, in order that they may believe in the thing that they chose. They like falsehood, they like delusion, so God sends delusion. There was a journalist in the turn of the 20th century called H.L. Mencken. He was called the Bard of Baltimore, had a gift for language. And he famously said, "Give the people what they want and give it to them good and hard." Okay? So they like falsehood and delusion. God sends them a strong delusion. In order that, part 3, so they should be condemned in the final choice. Who should be condemned? I'm taking the part from the first half of the last chunk and the second half. Who should be condemned? All the ones who didn't believe the truth, rather take pleasure in righteousness. So I want you to notice the implicit choice in there. The ones who didn't believe the truth, all the ones who didn't believe the truth, rather take pleasure in unrighteousness. They were faced with a choice, and their preference, their decision is falsehood and deception, unrighteousness, rather than the truth. That is so important. They're not condemned, they're not rejected because they were tricked or because they were fooled. Remember, the context verses 10 and 11, 9 and 10 talked about being deceived by Satan. They had access to the truth of God and delusion, and there were some who were committed to the falsehood, to the delusion, and would be condemned. But notice, God sends a strong delusion, and ultimately those who are condemned are those who, when faced with the truth of God and a strong delusion, favored the delusion. This is critically important. No one got tricked. The condemnation is because I was a victim. The devil made me do it. The condemnation is not because you were tricked. Those who were tricked, those who favored falsehood and deception, were given another deception, another delusion, access to it by God, along with the truth of God, and they had to make a decision. The question here is, ultimately, when you are confronted with the choice, which way did you go? So the notion of God sending a delusion is to those who favor delusion to get an opportunity to set aside delusion in favor of the truth. There's a reality from the early chapters of Genesis all the way to the late chapters of Revelation that people and nations are always faced with what we call a covenant lawsuit. They're brought to the bar of justice to see whether or not they accept or reject the sovereignty of God. So let's talk Adam and Eve quickly. After they eat, after they realize they're naked, they put on fig leaves, they're hiding. God comes in the cool of the evening to talk with Adam and Eve, and he says, "Where are you?" "We're hiding." "Why are you hiding?" "Because we're naked." Who told you you were naked? Did you eat from the tree that you were told not to eat from? Does God not know these things? Of course he does. But the covenant lawsuit gives a person the opportunity to discuss the fact that they were faced with the truth of God and deception. You can eat from that and not die. God's only telling you not to eat from that because if you eat from that tree, you'll be like God, knowing good from evil. Did you eat from the tree I told you not to? I did, but it's the woman you gave me's fault. Is this true? Yeah, but it's that serpent that you made. It's his fault. No. It's not that the devil made you do it. It's that you who knew the truth of God favored falsehood and deception, and God is going to come to you with a covenant lawsuit to determine whether you are going to accept the sovereignty of God or whether you favor falsehood and deception. So this weird verse, this strange notion, is about justice. There's a justice issue at play here. You are not tricked by Satan if you find yourself on the outs. You're not a victim. You had access to truth, and you also had access to a delusion, and you ultimately are in this predicament because you favored or chose the delusion. That's why it says, for those who favored falsehood, who favored delusion, and rejected the truth of God, that God sent a strong delusion and gave them, they always had the chance, they always had the opportunity in the covenant lawsuit to say, I accept the sovereignty of God and I reject the falsehood and deception that makes me the sovereign, or makes Satan the sovereign, or makes anything else the sovereign. There's room on the throne for one, and God's not going to share sovereignty. So who told you were naked? The liar told you were naked. The liar told you that you could be like God if you ate from that fruit. The liar told you that the throne was available to you. And if you chose to believe that, if you accept that delusion, there's condemnation coming. But the good news is, what we see in this text, in this on its face, harsh, strange sounding text, is God wants to confront you with a choice between the truth or deception. If you want deception, you can choose deception. Give the people what they want. Give it to them good and hard. But don't choose deception is the message of the gospel from the garden through the end of Revelation. Choose the truth, choose the true sovereign, and reject delusion, strong delusion, deception, false signs and wonders, the lie that you can be your own God. Pretty great stuff. I hope that was good for you. I hope the questioner who wrote in about that one finds the answer fulfilling and satisfying, and I hope you do too. And if so, please like, share, subscribe, leave me some feedback in the comments, and until next time, Karis Kairene Humin, grace and peace to you.